This is one of a series of Good Answers presentations, offering evidence to answer skeptical challenges to the Bible's accuracy. One of the most treasured principles in Western legal tradition is the presumption of innocence. Anyone under suspicion is deemed to be innocent until and unless proven guilty. But while we revere that idea in jurisprudence, we find many biblical historians who hold an opposite view of the Bible. That is, its narrative is assumed to be false until proven true. Notice this review of The Bible Unearthed by Israel Finkelstein and Neil Silberman. It's a balanced, thoughtful, bold reconsideration of the historical period that produced the Hebrew Bible. The headline news in this book is easy to pick out. There is no evidence for the existence of Abraham or any of the patriarchs. Ditto for Moses and the Exodus. And the same goes for the whole period of Judges and the united monarchy of David and Solomon. In fact, the authors argue that it is impossible to say much of anything about ancient Israel until the 7th century BC, around the time of the reign of King Josiah. That's a review on Amazon.com. One of the most disputed episodes in the Bible history is the Exodus. Authors like those above are fond of pointing out the lack of traces of Israel's 40 years in the Sinai wilderness. Surely, they say, all those people spending all that time there ought to have left some debris that we could find to prove their presence there. And those who do believe Moses' account have to admit that we have found no physical proof of Israel's sojourn in the Sinai. As one who does trust the narrative in Exodus, I like to cite the common saying among archaeologists: absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. In other words, just because we haven't found footprints, we can't declare that nobody has been through here. They may have trod lightly. Nomadic peoples do. And I also like to recall all those times when skeptics challenged the truth of some Bible event or person, only to be embarrassed when an archaeologist's dig turned up the key evidence. Even so, for now, we are still waiting for somebody to find traces in the Sinai. But what kind of traces would we expect to find? Maybe a sign stuck in the sand like this one? And to be sure, it ought to have a handprint to verify that it's not forgery. But then maybe we are looking for inanimate objects when something else can give us answers. Why not ask the Bedouin? They've been there a long time, and maybe they can tell us something. But some world travelers may be wondering if I'm in the wrong century. Hadn't I heard that there are some gorgeous, luxurious resorts in the Sinai? Resorts with crystalline pools and women in bikinis? Resorts that employ Bedouin who prefer jeans and cut-off tops to a kaftan or a madraga? Yes, but those are along the shore. In the interior, the old ways can still be found, and some of them are well worth noticing. But let's start with a paragraph from Exodus. Moses, hoping to help his people, kills an Egyptian taskmaster. Quote, when Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Exodus 2:15 and 16. There are still wells like that in the Sinai. Here's one, and we can still see that the old tradition holds. Women come to draw water for the flocks, and many of them will be wearing the yalabiyah, the long hooded robe, and the niqab, the veil. To Westerners, the garb suggests mystery, but for the wearer, both modesty and protection from sun damage are the reasons. Notice, though, that what Moses supposedly found at a well in Midian can still be seen in the Sinai today. As you will recall, it was in this wilderness that Moses met God. Quote, on one day, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. That's Exodus 3:1-3. Is there anything in the Sinai at all like that? Well, it depends on how you interpret things. If you visit the monastery of St. Catherine on the slopes of Mount Sinai, you'll see this plant. What is it? Quote, scientists say it is a very rare plant, Rubus sanctus, a non-fruit-bearing relative of the blackberry bramble. Professor Joseph Hobbs, who has written the most readable and up-to-date account of the Sinai, points out that Rubus sanctus is an extremely hardy growth which can last thousands of years. That's Robert Wernick in his book Mount Sinai, Holy Ground in a Jolly Desert. And some will tell you that this is the very burning bush. Here's something more on that plant, this time from Professor Hobbs himself. Its original spot was covered by a chapel dedicated to the Annunciation, with a silver star marking where the roots of the bush had come out of the ground. The monks at St. Catherine's Monastery, following church tradition, believe that this bush is, in fact, the original bush seen by Moses, rather than later, and anyone entering the chapel is required to remove their shoes, just as Moses was in the biblical account. That's Professor Hobbs' book, Mount Sinai, from 1995. What can one say about that? Well, at the very least, it makes an interesting part of a visit to an ancient monastery. But we were going to be asking the Bedouin, not the Christian monks. Recall the origins of the Passover with its unleavened bread? Exodus tells us this, quote, celebrate the feast of unleavened bread, because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. In the first month you are to eat bread made without yeast. Well, the Bedouin make bread too. They call it libeh. They bake it over an open fire, either on a metal sheet or sometimes just right on the coals. The recipe is simple: flour, water, and a pinch of salt. No yeast. Something in common there? Of course, the Jewish practice was for a special occasion each spring for Passover. Quote, "On the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect. All the people of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight." That's Exodus 12, 3-6. That spring ritual required the sacrifice of a lamb. Well, the Bedouin have a spring feast too. They call it Rabi'ah, and for the occasion they slaughter a lamb, as they're doing here. But Passover is not just a feast. It's a ritual of thanksgiving, marked by the use of that lamb's blood. Quote, "Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs." Exodus 12:7. And on that first Passover night, the blood saved the firstborn in every Jewish household, while those of the Egyptians died. Passover was to be repeated every year in spring. As I had just observed, the Bedouin have their own spring feast too, and it's interesting to see what they do with the blood of that lamb that they killed. They smear it on their animals and on the foreheads of their children. Why, we may ask? They'll tell us it's for their protection, and it's something of a good luck charm. Where might they have gotten a notion like that? Well, Mosaic law provided for another annual festival, the Feast of Tabernacles, or booths. Leviticus tells us this: "Celebrate this as a festival to the Lord for 7 days each year. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. Celebrate it in the 7th month. Live in booths for 7 days. All native-born Israelites are to live in booths, so your descendants will know that I had the Israelites live in booths when I brought them out of Egypt. I am the Lord, your God." That's Leviticus 23:41-43. So even when their years of wandering were over and they had permanent dwellings, they were to remember their sojourn in Sinai by living in temporary shelters for a week each fall. The Bedouin have a fall festival too. It celebrates the date harvest, and for that occasion they construct temporary shelters like this one and live in them for the time of the festival. They use whatever vegetation is available, since it will be abandoned afterward and they will move on. It's a curious practice, but strikingly similar in time, appearance, and purpose to the Jewish Feast of Booths. The people of Israel found it difficult to trust God in those wilderness days. Remember that even when he was providing miraculous manna for them, they grew tired of it and complained. Then God called Moses and said, quote, "Tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow, when you will eat meat. The Lord heard you when you wailed, 'If only we had meat to eat, we were better off in Egypt.' Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it. You will not eat it for just 1 day or 2 days or 5, 10, or 20 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it." Numbers 11:18-20. And then something truly remarkable happened. Now a wind went out from the Lord and drove quail in from the sea. It brought them down all around the camp to about 3 feet above the ground, as far as a day's walk in any direction. All that day and night, and all the next day, the people went out and gathered quail. No one gathered less than 10 homers. Then they spread them out all around the camp. Numbers 11:31 and 32. Quail in the desert. Quail enough to provide for a multitude. Israel found it hard to believe, but God provided it. And if you visit the northern Sinai today in October, you'll see something like this. What are those huge nets for? That's right, to catch the quail, who descend on the region by the thousands, providing a feast for all. Was the experience of the Israelites a miracle, or just a natural seasonal windfall? Either way, what we see today reminds us that the Bedouin should understand well what happened so long ago. I guess that leaves us with today's question. Where did the Bedouin get these practices? Something very like the Passover ritual and the sacrifice of a lamb and using its blood as protection, and the preference for unleavened bread when much of the world uses yeast, and the Bedouin festival when they live in booths for no obvious reason, and the way they set nets for quail to come in on the wind each October. Where did they get these practices? Could it perhaps be that they got them from the people of Israel in the Sinai so long ago? And could it possibly be that the Bible's account of the Exodus is what really happened? If you have questions about this lecture, or any of the others in the Good Answers series, you may direct them to me, Dr. Jerry C. 4 at yahoo.com.